My heart was in his hands, literally. He was holding my heart in his hands. Today I'm going to talk about my open heart surgery. We're going to start off with the evening leading to the surgery. Then we're going to get into the surgery itself and what had happened throughout the surgery, or at least how it was told to me, and what it was like to first open up my eyes in the ICU. My name is Jim Leo, and you're listening to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. And first, a word from my sponsor. Today I'm going to discuss the actual surgery that I had. I'll start off with the evening before the surgery itself. It would have been maybe around 6 or 7 o'clock. I was at St. Michael's Hospital in my room. I was lucky to be assigned a semi-private, and that evening I was actually by myself, which was very nice because it allowed me to be alone with my thoughts, to kind of absorb what had happened 8 o'clock that morning when I first had the consult, and just in kind of absorbing what was about to happen the next day and for the next few months in my life. That evening I was going to be busy with pre-op testing, blood work and x-rays and stuff. So I'd asked my brother, maybe probably a good time for him to leave so he didn't have to feel like he had to be there. I was all settled in, and again, I was going to be busy getting tested. So he was kind enough to bring me down, which was nice to have him there. But I was missing my family. I was missing Carol and the kids. It was a little lonely, but not in a bad way, because again, it finally allowed me to really start to think about what was about to happen. I know I've had people ask if I feared the surgery itself, and quite honestly, I didn't. That wasn't what was causing me angst. And there's really two reasons for that. First and foremost, knowing that Dr. Verma had a 98% surgical success rate, that gave me a lot of comfort. Knowing that I was under the age of 50 at the time, and this was happening not as a result of a heart attack, so my heart was very strong. I mean, I had a lot going for me going into the surgery, so I didn't really fear it too much. And secondly, because of the multiple surgeries I've had in the past, minor ones like knee scope and gallbladder, and then my hip replacement, my attitude, rightly or wrongly, has always been, it's out of my hands, it's out of my control. There's nothing that I could really do about it at that point, and that I quite honestly just had to trust a lot of the nurses and the doctors that they knew what they were doing and that they would get me through this safely and hopefully alive. Really, the biggest angst that I had was in thinking about the mountain ahead of me, which was my recovery. Um, I experienced recoveries before with other surgeries, some very minor. I had 2 knee scopes within 2 months. My first knee scope, surgery went well, recovery went well. My second one, surgery went well, but recovery was a little bit more difficult for whatever reason. I also had my gallbladder removed, and again, another minor surgery, very common, not a big issue. The surgery itself went well, but I ended up having complications after the fact, and had to go to emerge about a week after my surgery, and had some additional testing done over the next few weeks, both an MRI, CT, and there was a concern that either A, I had a stone stuck in my bile duct, which was very dangerous, or secondly, potentially could have had cancer. Went through all the testing, it all resolved itself, and everything was clear, so thank goodness, no problems there. My hip replacement probably was the one that I would say was a little closer to what I was about to have. And the biggest challenge with the hip replacement, I mean, first and foremost, my right leg was really, really sore. And that's the hip that I had replaced. And every day I'd find a small little improvement. And I knew as long as every day there was a little of improvement, I was heading in the right direction. but I also couldn't, you know, put on my own socks. I needed lots of help, and I'm not someone who likes to ask for help. I'm very independent, like to do things on my own. I don't really like to bother anyone. But in this situation, I had to have Carol and the kids help me to, in one degree or another. But the biggest challenge that I had with the hip replacement was my energy. I would have a burst of energy that would last a few minutes, and then it felt like it was just sucked out of me. And 7 weeks later, I had my follow up with my orthopedic surgeon, and I mentioned to him that I was struggling with the energy. And he said, "Well, of course you are. Your body went through some trauma." And up until that point, I didn't really consider the surgery as traumatic to the body. Um, you know, I considered trauma to the body if someone was hit in the head, or someone was in a car accident, or if someone was shot, something that happened to the body violently. I didn't consider the surgery traumatic. And he pointed out to me, he says, "Well, let's think about this. We put an incision in your body. We then took a saw and we sawed off a piece of bone off your body. And then we replaced that with titanium in your body. And then we had to sew it all back together again. So that's very traumatic for the body." And you know what? I realized that he was right. And then I started to think, well, if a hip replacement was traumatic, what's this surgery going to be like for me, and what am I going to feel like afterwards? So I'll run through the steps that they had to go through, or my body went through during the surgery. I'm going to do my best to remember here. But they started off with an incision down my chest. And then after that, they took an electric saw and they sawed right down the middle of my breastbone from top to bottom. Then they had to pry open my rib cage so they can have access to my heart. And then they had to stop my heart from beating. So they did that. And then they had to put me on bypass, which allowed a machine to circulate the blood in my body to make sure that my organs and brain were still viable after the surgery. And then they placed an incision in my left leg, pulled out a couple of veins. One of the veins they sewed on my heart, in front of the heart. And my second vein, they had to lift my heart slightly out of my body, turn it over, sew that vein on from top to bottom to address some of the blockages there. And then they had to put me all back together again, put my rib cage back again, and they tied up my rib cage with titanium string. So there's no screws or plates or anything. It's literally titanium string is how they held it together, and with the expectation that it would infuse and heal over a period of time. And then I had a thought. I thought, what if everything doesn't fit back together again the way they found it? And I was thinking of times where I would buy something at a store, electronic equipment or whatever, and you take it out of the box and it's all nicely, tightly wrapped in there with styrofoam and plastic and twist ties. And you take it out, and maybe there's a defect or there's an issue, it's the wrong one, and you have to bring it back to the store. So you try to pack it all back up again and put it back in that same box, but it never quite fits the way it did when you first opened that up. So I thought, well, what if that happens to me? And it didn't. Everything fit back to in place again. No issues there. But these are some crazy things that you start to think about when you're laying in a hospital bed before surgery. So, it gave me time to, again, absorb a lot of the information. I was given a lot of information to read and to go through to kind of prepare me as well. And then I had to go to a room and watch a video. And the video, again, ran through what to expect, right before the surgery, during the surgery, in ICU, and then my time in the hospital. And one of the recommendations was that I share with my family, whoever was going to visit me in the ICU, what I was going to look like when I first came out of the ICU, because it was going to be very difficult to see. So I did share that with my family. And again, I'll share that with you, and I'm going to do my best to remember. But we'll start off with the obvious. I had, an IV in my left arm, so that was hooked up to a machine. I had a blood pressure monitor on me, going off every few minutes to monitor my blood pressure. I had a heart rate monitor attached to me, monitoring obviously my heart rate. And then I had a second IV, and that was actually placed right into the side of my neck. And I don't know 100% what that was for. I think it was to provide the pain meds directly into my chest area, because that's where I was going to feel the brunt of the pain. And, I had drainage tubes. I remember that. So the drainage tubes were in my body, sticking out of my body to drain a lot of the fluids in my heart area. I also remember there was a wire, electrical wire, that was inside me, coming out of my chest. And I had asked, within a couple of days after the surgery, what that was for. And they basically said they were jumper cables for my heart. So the wires were actually placed right inside, underneath my heart. So if my heart had stopped, they had direct access to try to get the heart going again. So that had that. I also was intubated. So I had this big, huge tube coming out of my mouth, and that was difficult to have. But I had one of those coming out of me. And then they also had to put an NG tube while I was in ICU, and I'll get into that shortly. So I did explain that this is what I was going to look like, and Carol, my brother, and my mom had said afterwards, even though it was difficult to see me in the state that I was in, they were thankful that I had prepared them, because it did make it a little bit easier. They knew what to expect. Well, that night I actually had a really good sleep. Didn't wake up, slept really, really well. It was quiet. Hospitals are generally not a really good place to rest if you've never been in a hospital, because there's a lot going on throughout the night. Nurses giving you needles, checking up on you. Usually the janitors are coming in and cleaning up the rooms. And if you have a neighbor that's suffering, there's issues with them. But that night I actually had a really good night's sleep. I was alone in my room. It was great. And I also knew it was probably going to be my last night of restful sleep for quite some time, because I was going to be very, very sore once I came out of the surgery. Woke up the next morning, 7:30, and all I could do was wait. Nurse came in and let me know that they were going to come and get me around 11 o'clock. So at least I knew the time. I let Carol know as well. And, Carol, my brother, and my mom showed up in the hospital. I don't remember exactly what time. I don't know if it was 9:30, 10, in and around that. They were dealing with traffic. And 11 o'clock, or in and about then, they came to my room, asked if I was ready. I'm like, yep, let's get this over with. So they transferred me to another bed. I was out in the hallway, and I'm laying there, and I can, I'm looking up, and I see my mom, Carol, my brother. And I got to say, at that moment, I just felt so weak and so vulnerable. And, they started rolling me down the hallway, and I started having thoughts of the movie The Green Mile, where they were walking the prisoner down the Green Mile towards his execution chair. I was hoping that I wasn't going to be executed, but that's kind of like what it felt like. So now we're in this other waiting area, close to the operating room, and all four of us are sitting waiting there. And there'd be people from the surgical team, would show up and introduce themselves, let me know who they were, what their role was, what they were going to do, and if I had any questions. And then, a few minutes later, someone else from the surgical team would show up and kind of go through the same thing again. So that helped me to feel, comfortable. And all we could do was just sit and wait. And then I saw this panicked look in Carol's face, and I said, "What's wrong?" And at that moment, she realized that the diamond ring on her engagement ring had broken off and was missing. Right at that moment is when she realized it. So now we're kind of looking around the bed and the floor to see if it was there. And quite honestly, I mean, she could have lost it from anywhere from Tyrone all the way down to St. Mike's Hospital. And she started to get really, really upset. And she said, "Well, what if this is a bad omen?" And my response was, "Well, maybe it's a good omen." And she asked, "Well, how do you think this is a good omen? I lost the diamond on our engagement ring." I said, "Well, maybe we consider this a new beginning. You'll get a new diamond, and I'm going to get a new repaired heart. So let's look at this as a new beginning and not a bad omen." And for the record, I did get my new repaired heart. Still haven't gotten the new diamond for her diamond ring, but we're definitely working on that. And while I lay there, I did think about my kids. I did want them to go to school that day, just to kind of give them some kind of distraction. But Carol was there, and she had a smile on her face, but I can tell it was a forced smile that she just didn't want me to worry. So she was trying to give me her big smiles. My mom clearly was concerned. I could see it in her face. And my brother, my little brother, baby brother, he just had this blank look in his face. And I'd ask him, like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." But I knew he was struggling with what was about to happen. So we wait. Finally, I don't know if it's the head nurse, but someone from the team came over, introduced themselves, and said, "Jim, we're ready for you. Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Yep, let's go. Let's get this done." And kissed and hugged my family. They rolled me away and rolled me into the operating room. Now, if you've never been in an operating room, it's really not the most you know pleasant place to be in. It is what it is, and I can, they're rolling me over onto the surgical or towards the surgical table, which to me kind of looked like, the butcher's block or just a slab. It was just wide enough that it would fit my body on there. And if my butt cheek had kind of rolled over on either side of it, I probably would have toppled over. Like, that's how much space I had. It wasn't very much. And then they started to strap my arms, and now I'm starting to feel like I'm on a crucifix. And there's a lot of commotion going on, a lot of people, moving around doing their thing. From time to time, they check in on me. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." And I was waiting for Dr. Verma to show up. And all my other surgeries that I had had, the surgeon normally would walk in and, say hello and ask me if I had any last questions and how I was doing. And so I was waiting for that to happen, and that never happened. And if I really think about it, I think the total amount of face time that I had with Dr. Verma was probably the first 20 minutes the morning before when I had the consult, and about 20 minutes when I had my 7-week follow up with him, and that's it. I'm not complaining about it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or had any issues with it. That's just the way he operates, and who was I to question that? Again, 98% success rate. He obviously knows what he's doing. So I'm laying there, very calm again, not overly concerned. And then I can start to feel the heaviness coming on. Normally, when I've had surgery, I have a hard time saying this, anesthetist, that's probably wrong, but anyways, they would let me know. They would say, "Okay, we're going to put, the mask over you. You're going to start to feel sleepy, and we're going to also put some in your IV." I didn't get prepared at all. Basically, I started to feel the heaviness, and then right before my eyes closed, I can see they were putting the mask over my face, and I was out. And I'm thinking the reason why they did it that way was, about to have some serious surgery, that if they kind of gave me that pre-warning, that maybe I would have started to be a little anxious, and uncomfortable and freak out. So I'm actually happy that they didn't warn me. And they were doing the surgery. Don't really know what happened during the surgery. All I know is that they called it an uneventful surgery, meaning that it went smoothly with no issues, no hiccups. I think I was there for about 3.5 or 4 hours, which is about the amount of time they said it would take. And then they rolled me out of the operating room. And my understanding was my mom saw me getting rolled out and she burst out in tears. That must have been so hard for my mother and for Carol and my brother. But my mom to see, 46-year-old man, but I'm still her firstborn and her child in that state. I mean, I just don't know how I would have felt if I saw one of my two kids in that situation. So I understand why she was upset. But the nurse went over to her. This is what I was told, and asked her, "Why are you crying? This is really good news." She said to her, "I hope that these are tears of joy because this means your son's alive. He made it." I love saying that. He's alive because I was. I made it. And I think that helped my mom feel better afterwards. But now things, are starting to happen in terms of my recovery. The expectation was 24 hours in the ICU. Every hour that I made it through without any issues was a good hour. It meant I was that much closer to the recovery. In the 21st 24 hours, what I was told was I still was at high risk of stroking out, and I was also at high risk at having a massive heart attack because even though they do the tests and everything and kind of feel that everything's okay, they really don't know how a person's body is going to respond to something like that. So that's why I had to be 24 hours in the ICU. The first that I can recall opening in my eyes, I can recall that it was dark. I could see a nurse kind of off to the side. I knew at that point in time that I was in the ICU and that I wasn't in hell or in heaven because I didn't think that heaven or hell would look like this room that I was in. I can hear the humming of the machines. I can hear the heart rate monitor going off. I can hear the blood pressure monitor going off. I can hear the breathing machine, pumping air or oxygen into my breathing tube. And then I heard the nurse ask, "Jim, are you in pain?" And I kind of lay there for a little bit, and I'm like, "No." Now I couldn't speak at this point, so it was all through, hand gestures and nodding or shaking my head. But no, I wasn't in pain. Quite frankly, I was very, very numb. That's how I felt. Okay, good. Just let us know if you're in pain. We'll help you with that. And I was in and out of sleep or consciousness, maybe, as I was slowly kind of waking up. And then all of a sudden, I started to vomit violently. I don't know how it exited my body with that breathing tube in me, but I vomited a lot and had nurses come over, kind of hold me off to the side, let that kind of finish. They cleaned me all up. Second wave. Went through the same thing. Nurses come over, clean me all up. Third wave. And that's when they had to put the NG tube in me. And if you don't know what an NG tube is, it's a tube that they shove up your nose. It gets snaked down your throat and just above your stomach. And it's meant to suck whatever needs to be sucked out of there, bile, air, whatever. And I remember the nurse saying, we need to put an NG tube. We don't know why he's vomiting the way that he is. He probably has a lot of air in his stomach. And all this time I thought I was just fat. But it was air, according to them. So that's when the NG tube came in. Again, I think I went back to sleep again, and I'd wake up on and off. And I was starting to feel some panic because of the intubation, because of the breathing tube down my throat. I had warned the team before the surgery that just thinking about having that down my throat made me very anxious because I do suffer from claustrophobia, and for whatever reason, that was making me feel very claustrophobic. And as I was waking up more and more, I was starting to get a little agitated and panicking because of that tube. And you can't speak, so because of that tube's down your throat, you can try to communicate. You can't communicate. You can't do anything. At one point, they came over because they saw I was agitated. Like, "Are you okay?" And I kept pointing to my breathing tube, and they knew what the issue was. And they just said, "You have to wait a little bit more because we need to make sure that your lungs will start working on their own." That was why excuse me. That's why the breathing tube was there, because my lungs weren't working on their own. Eventually, they saw that my lungs were functioning, and they removed that breathing tube and the NG tube. And for me, that was a win. I'm like, all right, there's two things out of many that they finally were able to remove from my body. That's a good step. So I'm still in ICU, and all of a sudden, I wake up and I hear a bunch of commotion from the nurses. And I kind of, break open one of my eyes to look to see what was going on. And excuse me for the pause. And all of a sudden, I heard, "Mr. Lau's having a stroke. Mr. Lau's having a stroke." And I'm thinking, well, that sucks. And nurses are running around yelling out, Mr. Lau, can you hear me? Mr. Lau's having a stroke." And I'm laying there thinking, well, this isn't good. I knew it was a risk. I knew it was a possibility. I just didn't think it was going to happen to me. And that really was a concern. And I thought, that's it. I'm done. This is over with. But I was very calm. It was really weird. It was very calm as this was all happening. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is really bad for Carol. This is really bad for the kids. They're going to, grow up without a father. Carol's going to lose her husband. My mom's going to lose her son. Siblings lose their brother. Like, it was just bad news. And while I'm thinking all this, the commotion continues on about Mr. Lau having a stroke, Mr. Lau having a stroke. And then I start to think, well, I've watched a lot of medical dramas in my life. I'm waiting for the light to show up, and I'm going to fight going to that light, but I'm waiting for it. And I don't really know how long this went on for. But then at one point, as I'm waiting for the light to show up, I can hear the nurse. It happened to be my nurse. I had a male nurse on their shift. And I can hear him on the phone speaking with somebody. And based on the conversation, I thought he was speaking with Carol. And I thought, oh, he's telling the poor girl what just happened. And then I hear, "Oh, no. You're LAO, Mr. Lau? No, he's fine. He's recovering just fine. We had a Mr. LAU that just had a stroke. But yours is fine. He's recovering nicely." And I thought, whoa. I mean, I felt bad for the other Mr. LAU, and I hope that he recovered and he's doing well. But it was a big relief that I wasn't the one actually having the stroke. So now we're about 16 hours in the ICU, and they announced that I'm doing so well that they could move me out of the ICU 8 hours ahead of schedule and bring me to my room upstairs, which was fantastic news. So I think I'm going to wrap things up now at this point. You've heard about my surgery. If you are someone who's about to deal with a major surgery or is recovering from surgery and you have any questions, you'd like to speak with me, reach out to me, jim@tvhgroup.ca. I'd love to hear your story and maybe answer some questions you might have. My name is Jim Leo. You're listening to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. Have yourselves a great and loving day. Take care. Well, there you have it. There's the story behind my open heart surgery. I'm hoping that I no longer have to deal with any surgeries moving forward. And in my next episode, I'm going to talk about my recovery, some of the challenges that I went through the roller coaster ride, and how I overcame climbing that mountain. Once again, my name is Jim Leo. You've listened to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. Take care.